The Reed mansion stood high above Bel Air, its tall gates and manicured hedges hiding most of the property from the street. Inside, the air carried the faint scent of lemon polish and fresh coffee. But there was no warmth in it, only the stillness of a place that ran like clockwork, every movement precise, every voice hushed. Outside, morning fog hung over the hills, softening the view of Los Angeles below. From the driveway, Angela Brooks could see just enough to know the city was waking up, cars moving like tiny beads of light on the freeway, the sun slowly burning its way through the mist. She tightened her grip on the handle of her worn leather bag and followed the woman in the navy skirt suit who had introduced herself as Linda Porter. Linda's shoes clicked against the marble floor as she led the way through a hallway lined with paintings, landscapes, city skylines, but no family photos. "The kitchen's over here, but you'll get your own schedule later," Linda said, her tone brisk. Angela nodded, taking in the polished counters, the industrial-sized refrigerator, the scent of fresh toast. A coffee mug sat near the sink, a silver spoon resting neatly inside. No one lingered to drink from it. The house felt like a hotel that had been stripped of its guests. Staff moved quietly, almost soundlessly, going about their work with practiced efficiency. A butler in a charcoal vest, Henry Wallace, passed by carrying a silver tray of folded linens. He gave Angela a polite nod before disappearing into another wing. Linda kept her pace steady, speaking in short bursts of information, what doors stayed locked, which rooms were off-limits, when Jonathan Reed usually left for the office. She didn't mention the boy until they reached a glass-walled sunroom at the back of the house. "He spends most of his time here," Linda said, her voice dropping just enough to make Angela look at her. Inside, the room was flooded with pale light, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing a lush garden. In the center sat a small wheelchair, and in it, a boy with chestnut-brown hair, pale skin, and eyes fixed on something far away. Maybe the orange tree near the wall, maybe nothing at all. He didn't move when they stepped inside. Angela's breath caught for a moment, the way it had the first time she saw her daughter Faith's hospital bed years ago. Too still, too quiet. "Noah," Linda said gently, but the boy didn't react. "This is Angela. She'll be helping around the house." Jonathan Reed appeared in the doorway then, tall, clean-shaven, his navy suit sharp enough to belong on a magazine cover. His expression was polite, but his eyes gave nothing away. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, shaking her hand briefly, "please, just follow the routine. He's comfortable with what he knows." Angela nodded, though inside she felt the weight of what he wasn't saying. Don't try to change anything. Don't get his hopes up. When Jonathan left, Linda escorted Angela back toward the front of the house. "We keep things quiet here," Linda explained. "No loud music, no experiments. Mr. Reed values stability." Angela said nothing, but her mind was already turning over the details she'd seen, the way Noah's eyes blinked slowly, how his hands rested limp in his lap. Stability might keep things calm, but it didn't bring anyone back to life. By mid-morning, Angela had unpacked her few belongings in a modest room on the second floor, a small dresser, a narrow bed, and a window that overlooked the garden. She could see the sunroom from here, Noah still sitting in the same position. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed 10. She spent the next hours learning the kitchen from Maria Gomez, the chef, who was warmer than Linda, but careful with her words. "Mr. Reed's a good man," Maria said, slicing ripe avocados. "He's just afraid. Losing Mrs. Reed, then the accident. It changed him." Angela didn't press for details. She knew enough about loss to recognize its shadows. In the afternoon, she passed the sunroom on her way to the laundry. Noah sat as before, his gaze unfocused. On impulse, she hummed a tune, soft, the kind Faith used to love. She didn't look directly at him as she walked past. Halfway down the hall, Angela glanced over her shoulder. Noah's eyes were following her. She slowed her steps, letting the last note fade, and saw his gaze track the movement of her lips. He didn't smile, but something in his expression shifted. Barely there, but enough to stir the air between them. That night, after the staff had gone to their quarters, Angela found herself back at the sunroom doorway. Noah was still awake, a blanket over his legs, the soft glow from the garden lights casting patterns on the floor. She stepped closer, her voice low. "I think we're going to be friends, Noah," she said. For the first time, he blinked twice, the motion deliberate, almost like an answer. Noah's eyes followed the sound of Angela's humming long after she'd left the room. It was subtle at first, just the way his gaze stayed fixed toward the hallway, but Maria Gomez noticed it when she brought in his afternoon snack. "He was listening," Maria whispered to Angela later in the kitchen, slicing oranges. Angela only smiled, tucking the thought away. The next day she found an excuse to bring Noah outside, knowing the early afternoon was warm enough to be pleasant, but not harsh. Maria helped wheel him out to the patio, the scent of orange blossoms riding the mild Bel Air breeze. A low wall of hedges framed the yard, beyond which the tops of palm trees swayed gently. Somewhere down the hill, a gardener's leaf blower hummed, but here it was peaceful. Angela pulled out her phone and tapped an old Motown track, the kind that made her daughter dance in socks on the kitchen floor. Noah's eyes shifted toward the speaker. Angela leaned down, pretending to talk to the lemon tree in the corner. "You've been here a while, huh? Bet you've seen some things." She chuckled softly, acting as though the tree had answered back. Noah's lips didn't move, but the corner of his eyes tightened. Interest. "See that?" she said, pointing to a small bird hopping along the patio edge. "That's a California towhee. They're plain brown, easy to miss, but they've got a stubborn streak." She let the music fill the space between her words. Maria brought out lemonade, setting a glass on the table beside them. Nurse Susan Miller stood in the doorway, arms folded. She didn't interfere, but her posture was stiff, the kind of stance that said she was clocking every move. Angela reached into her bag and pulled out a small sketch pad and crayons, items she'd bought that morning at a corner store on Beverly Glen. "I thought maybe we could draw something," she said, placing them on the patio table. Noah's gaze flicked toward the bright colors, then back to her. "No rush," Angela added. She began to draw a tree herself, her strokes slow and deliberate, narrating as she went. "See, this one's a lemon tree. This one," she hesitated, "this one's my daughter. She loved drawing trees." Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Noah's fingers twitch. Angela didn't react, just kept sketching. When she slid the paper toward him, a faint sound, a breath, maybe a laugh, escaped him. She looked up, smiling, but before she could say more, Susan cleared her throat. "Mr. Reed prefers—" The sentence died when Linda Porter appeared behind her. "Angela," Linda said, her tone even, but laced with warning. "A word, please." Inside, away from Noah, Linda's voice dropped. "Jonathan won't tolerate false progress. He's seen too many ups and downs. Just don't give the boy what you can't guarantee." Angela nodded, though she didn't agree. Some things couldn't be guaranteed, but they were worth reaching for anyway. That evening, Angela found the sketch pad on the patio table. A single crayon drawing sat in the center of the page, 3 stick figures holding hands, one tall, one shorter, and one small with a round head. The tallest figure had hair the color of hers. Upstairs, Jonathan paused at the window, looking down at the patio. He could see Angela still sitting with Noah, the two of them framed by the soft glow of the garden lights. For a brief moment, something unreadable passed over his face. Then his expression hardened again, the kind of armor worn by someone who had learned that hope could hurt as much as loss. Jonathan's voice was calm, but his words cut like glass. "I don't want him to get hurt again." The fire in the library crackled softly, the only sound in the room besides the slow turning of pages from a book Jonathan hadn't actually been reading. Angela stood a few feet away, hands clasped loosely in front of her. "He's not fragile in the way you think," she said. "He's a boy who wants to live." Jonathan closed the book, setting it on the side table. "Mrs. Brooks, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I've seen small improvements vanish overnight. It's cruel to make him believe in something that may not last." Henry Wallace, who had just set a tray of tea on the coffee table, lingered longer than usual. He met Angela's eyes for a brief second, something sympathetic flickering there. Jonathan poured himself a cup, then seemed to think better of it and set the pot down. "We have a routine for a reason," he said. Angela thought about Faith, about the hospital corridors that smelled faintly of bleach and cafeteria coffee. She remembered the doctor telling her, "The progress is only temporary," and how, even then, she'd kept singing to her daughter because it made the days less lonely. A chime from the landline phone broke the moment. Jonathan crossed to answer it. "Yes, Robert," he said after a pause. His posture stiffened. "I understand. I'll handle it." He hung up, the set of his jaw tight. Without looking at Angela, he said, "That was Robert Hayes. He's concerned about appearances. The board is watchful." Angela exhaled through her nose, steady. Maybe they should be concerned about the boy instead. Later that evening, Angela settled into the armchair by Noah's bed, a worn children's book in her lap. "Goodnight, stars. Goodnight, air. Goodnight, noises everywhere," she read softly, her voice carrying the same rhythm she'd used for Faith. Noah's eyes tracked the movement of her mouth. Halfway through, she noticed his right hand twitch against the blanket. She kept reading, pretending not to see. When she reached the last page, Noah's fingers moved again, this time curling slightly. She set the book down, slipping her hand under his. His small fingers pressed weakly but unmistakably into her palm. Henry appeared in the doorway, silent, taking in the scene. His face softened. "This house finally sounds like a home again," he murmured, barely above a whisper. Angela looked up, meeting his gaze. Before she could answer, another voice joined them. Jonathan stood just outside the pool of lamplight, his expression unreadable. He hadn't made a sound coming in. For a moment, he looked as though he might say something, but instead, he simply watched. The flicker from the fireplace, casting shadows across his face. The garden was alive with the smell of roses and fresh-cut grass, the kind of late spring morning that made Bel Air feel like a private paradise. Angela adjusted the footrests on Noah's wheelchair, checking the straps the way Caleb Foster, his physical therapist, had shown her. "We're going to try something new today," she told him, keeping her tone casual, almost conspiratorial. Maria stood nearby, hands folded in front of her apron, while Linda Porter lingered at the edge of the patio, arms crossed. Angela rolled the chair onto the flat stone path that cut through the garden. "Ready?" she asked, though she knew he couldn't answer in words. She slid the footrests away, placed her hands gently under his arms, and waited for him to shift his weight forward. At first, nothing. Then, slowly, Noah leaned into her, his legs trembling as they straightened. Maria let out a small gasp. "That's it," Angela whispered. "One step at a time." His right foot moved first, the left dragging just enough to follow. One step, then another. The garden seemed to hold its breath. Linda's hands had dropped from her chest to her sides now, her eyes fixed on the boy. Angela kept her grip steady but light, letting him take the lead. The third step came with a shaky exhale from Noah, and then his knees gave out. She caught him before he could fall, easing him back into the chair. Maria's eyes were wet, and even Linda's voice wavered when she said, He walked." From the side gate, footsteps crunched on the gravel. Jonathan stood there, still in his suit, a leather briefcase dangling from one hand. He took in the scene without moving for a long beat. Then he set the briefcase down and walked to Noah's side, kneeling so they were eye level. "You did it, son," he said, his voice low but thick. Noah's lips curved just enough to be called a smile. The moment was pure and quiet, until a faint clicking sound carried from beyond the hedge. Angela's head snapped toward it. A man with a camera was standing just outside the property line, lens trained on them. Linda's mouth tightened, and Jonathan's shoulders stiffened. Somewhere behind them, Robert Hayes's phone buzzed. He stepped out from the side path, glancing at the screen before sliding it back into his jacket. "Looks like someone already knows," he said, his tone unreadable. Angela didn't miss the way his eyes flicked toward the gate. Jonathan rose, his hand still resting on Noah's shoulder. "We'll handle it," he said, though it wasn't clear if he was speaking to Angela, Robert, or himself. Angela crouched beside Noah again, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "This is your day," she told him quietly. "Nobody gets to take that from you." But she could already feel the shift in the air. The private miracle was about to become very public. The marble floors of the Los Angeles County Superior Court reflected the morning light in sharp white strips. Every footstep echoed, as if the building itself wanted to remind you of where you were. Angela smoothed the skirt of her navy dress, the same one she'd worn for Faith's memorial service years ago. Jonathan stood beside her, his tie perfectly knotted, his jaw set in the familiar way that said he was holding back more than he was letting on. They sat at the respondents' table, waiting. Across the aisle, Helen and Edward Grant, Noah's maternal grandparents, looked every bit the part of people who believed they were doing the right thing. Helen's pearl earrings caught the light. Edward's hand rested over hers. Behind them sat Robert Hayes, his eyes forward, but his presence heavy. A court-appointed guardian ad litem, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and a notepad in her lap, sat near the judge's bench, ready to give her independent assessment of the best interest of the child. The judge entered, and the bailiff's voice filled the room. "All rise." Everyone stood. The session began with the Grant's attorney laying out their case. Jonathan was too occupied with corporate responsibilities. Angela was unqualified and had no legal or familial tie to Noah. Words like stability and permanence were repeated with a rhythm meant to sound reasonable. When it was Jonathan's turn, his attorney kept the tone measured. Jonathan testified about Noah's routines, his therapy, his education plan. He didn't embellish. He didn't need to. Caleb Foster, the physical therapist, described Noah's steady progress, incremental but meaningful. Then came Dr. Thomas Bennett from Cedars-Sinai, confirming the improvements weren't a fluke, but the result of consistent engagement, both physical and emotional. Angela was called last. She spoke plainly, without notes, about her first day at the mansion, about humming a tune and seeing Noah's eyes follow her. She talked about the day he laughed, the first time he held her hand, the steps in the garden. "I can't promise what tomorrow will bring," she said, "but I can promise that Noah will never feel alone in this world if I can help it." The judge glanced at the guardian ad litem, who nodded once. "The child's preference?" the judge asked. A murmur went through the courtroom. Noah was young, but the court allowed brief testimony. Jonathan wheeled him forward. The judge leaned down slightly. "Noah, do you know why you're here today?" Noah's voice was soft, but clear enough to carry. "My family is Daddy and Angela." Silence settled over the courtroom. Helen's hand tightened on Edward's, her face shifting from determination to something else. Acceptance, maybe grief, maybe both. The judge's voice was firm but warm. "Case dismissed. Custody remains with Mr. Reed. Ms. Brooks will continue in her role as caregiver." Angela exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. Jonathan's hand brushed hers under the table, a silent thank you. As they left, Helen stepped forward. "Angela," she said quietly, "maybe we could come visit, and maybe help." Angela nodded. "I think Noah would like that." Outside, the California sun felt brighter than it had in weeks, but Angela knew this wasn't the end, just the start of something new they would have to build together. The late afternoon sun in Pasadena stretched long, golden fingers across the courtyard of the new center, catching the laughter of children as they played along the garden path. There was a sense of quiet triumph in the air, not loud or showy, but the kind that comes when people have walked a long road together and made it through. Some guests wandered the halls. Others shared coffee and small talk under the shade of the white tent. For the Black community members who had come to celebrate, the day felt like more than just a ribbon cutting. It was a reminder that healing can happen in places where, not long ago, doubt and prejudice had set deep roots. The heart of the story lay in its simple truth: dignity matters. When we stand for what's right, without shouting over one another, we create room for justice to grow. Angela's quiet persistence, Jonathan's eventual openness, and Noah's small but mighty steps weren't just personal victories. They became a lesson for everyone watching. In the Black community, stories like these echo through generations, reminding parents and grandparents that resilience is as much about patience as it is about courage. It isn't always the loudest voice that changes a life. Sometimes it's the steady hand or the soft word that makes all the difference. Life has a way of testing us where we least expect it. People may size us up in an instant, measuring our worth by the way we look, the work we do, or the neighborhood we come from. But just as a seed pushes through concrete to find the sun, truth and justice can come from places most folks overlook, or worse, dismiss. And when that truth is carried by someone from the Black community, it challenges the tired stereotypes and writes a better chapter for the next generation to inherit. Like a lamp in a window on a dark night, one quiet act of kindness can guide us through the roughest stretches of the road. So maybe take a moment to think about who, in your own life, has surprised you by standing up when it mattered most. The neighbor you barely knew who showed up when trouble came knocking. The coworker who spoke up when you didn't expect it. The friend who never let go of your hand in the storm. If this story has touched your heart, consider sharing it, because the warmth you pass along might be the very thing someone else is searching for. And long after the balloons come down and the chairs are folded away, the sound of laughter in that Pasadena garden will keep carrying on the breeze, a quiet reminder that home is built not by walls, but by the people who choose to stand inside them together.